Sports Talk Chicago. I'm Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's the former president of the Miami Marlins and the host of Nothing Personal on the CBS Sports Podcast Network. Please welcome David Samson to the program. David, it's great to have you on. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. It's baseball time, baby.
What was your reaction to the end of the lockout?
Finally. No, I knew. I'd been talking about the lockout on my show for a long time, and I knew that both sides had to get right to the edge of the cliff, hanging on by their fingernails, about to fall into the abyss of a missed games or a missed season, and they finally looked at each other and said, uh-oh, we better settle right now, because if we don't, we're not going to be able to play 162.
How'd you evaluate the deal itself? Was it fair based on what you saw?
I hate the deal from a small market standpoint. I think it was way too big a give to the players. I think the minimum salaries went way higher than I would have liked. I wanted the CBT to be way lower than it is because teams use that as a salary cap. And so teams will spend up to that cap. As soon as the revenue turns around post-COVID, which it will starting this year, you'll see more teams crawl up against that. And I think you'll see bigger payroll disparities. I don't think it dealt with tanking. We're seeing what the Reds and A's are doing. So all of the things that tried to get taken care of, I think that over time you'll see that the players may not have accomplished everything they wanted to, but they really did do quite well.
What's the biggest change to the game do you think we'll see?
Well, I think that the biggest change, if I had to guess, in terms of on-field, is that there will be changes made faster than, as an example, we thought going into this year, no more runner on second base to start extra innings. And I was part of that rule with the competition committee when I was in baseball. I love that rule. I need that rule because having 18-inning games is a nightmare because, A, I want to go home. B, I don't want to have to call up a pitcher to replace my tomorrow starter who had to pitch 4 innings when he wasn't supposed to. I don't want to have to put a reliever on the injured list because he had to throw extra pitches. And I don't want to see all my hitters getting down on the knob and trying to hit a home run to end the game because they're grumpy and they're missing their dinner. So I love that rule. And the rule got taken away. And then you read 2 days later, they're negotiating to put it back. So maybe what you're seeing is more cooperation between players and owners during the course of a CBA, and that will be very good for the game.
Explain to me how that works. How do they go from not having the rule to now trying to negotiate and put it back in?
So the collective bargaining agreement is a living document. And what that means is during the course of the term, which is 5 years, there's a bunch of things that are not contained in that document that are still part of the game. And it requires discussion between the two sides, between employers and employees, because things change. Things evolve. And when employers and employees don't get along, they start fighting about everything, even if they agree. And the best example is the universal DH, where last year there was no universal DH, even though both sides wanted it. But they hate each other so much back then that they couldn't agree to it. You're going to see that change, I hope. Rob Manfred is trying to have a better relationship with the players, and I'm hoping that that cooperation will improve the product on the field.
What do you make of the expanded playoffs? Is 12 too many?
Oh, God, no. I was all in on 14 because I can sell into the playoffs. So if I'm within 5 games of a playoff spot on September 1st, I can send out postseason invoices, and I can take money from fans who are reserving their postseason tickets, and I can bill them for the maximum number of home games. And then when we don't make the playoffs, or if we don't play every home game, we can use that money as a deposit to next year's season ticket holders. But I've got the use of the cash that entire time. So I always wanted to be within 5 games of a playoff spot September 1st. And the more teams who make it, the more teams who are within 5 games, the better it is.
Did the teams keep that money? Like if you don't make the playoffs and the fans pay, you keep that?
Boy, we make it hard for you to get a refund, I'll tell you that.
David Samson here on Sports Talk Chicago. David, how vindicated do you feel after Derek Jeter got let go from the Marlins?
So it's a great question. I'm not vindicated because everybody knew I was right from the beginning. So there was nothing to be vindicated about. It was quite obvious that he would not be able to be better at the job than I was because it's a hard job. And he tried to come in, and his whole way of doing business was just everything I did, he did the opposite, right? He did a full Costanza, thinking that that would be the way to succeed. But I never wanted him to get fired because I just knew he would. But more importantly, I think it's better for the organization, both on and off the field. And I'm hopeful because I want there to be another World Series championship in Miami. I think it'd be so cool to win 3 rings before all these other teams get even one, right? Or to have 3 rings in the same time period that the Dodgers have 1 or the Yankees have 1, right? That's cool to me. So I root for the Marlins to win.
What specifically led to his downfall in Miami?
Hubris.
Really?
Right? So he came in with a plan that he would get all sorts of extra revenue, more season ticket holders, more corporate sponsorship, a big TV deal, a big naming rights deal, and then the payroll would get to go high, and he'd get to sign all these players and be a hero. And he just forgot that if you don't get the revenue, then the payroll's not going to go up. And that's what happened. They didn't get the revenue, and so the payroll didn't go up. But Bruce Sherman was never going to publicly say that he fired Derek Jeter because he holds him in such high regard as a player, and he was never going to embarrass him. But the relationship between Jeter and Sherman completely disappeared.
How big of a hole did he put the Marlins in today?
I wouldn't say they're in a hole at all. You know, they have a nice farm system, which I never really cared about because I wanted a good major league team. They've got a good young pitching staff, but they've got to win now, but they don't have the ability to have a player or 2 or 3 to help them win now. And that's the real problem, is that when a small revenue team is ready to win, you have to be ready to help that team. And I think Jeter knew this was the window because his pitchers are going to start getting more expensive, but there's just not the payroll capacity.
How long do you think it takes for the Marlins to become an NL East contender, even a World Series contender?
So they're going to have to go through another rebuild, right? And no one wants to hear that, but there's windows that open and close. You know, Bruce Sherman met the media, the owner of the Marlins, and he said something that just shows that he's not experienced. He said, we don't want to win just this year. We want to win every year. We're not going to be like the past owner. We're not going to have ups and downs. We're going to win every year. Well, Bruce, I got a surprise for you. Unless you're the Yankees, it ain't going to happen. Every year, 15 teams don't win 81 games on average. And when you're a small revenue team, you're going to have windows of opportunity that open and then they close. And then you reopen them and then they close. And the best front offices know how to minimize the downside and maximize the upside, but you can't eliminate it.
Did you appreciate the shot from Bruce?
You know, he was so to people who don't know, he was not willing to say that Jeter got fired, but he certainly was willing to say that they're going to spend money after Jeter claimed that they weren't willing to spend money. But again, when you're an owner, you don't stand there spring training and say we're going to spend money. You don't raise expectations of your fan base because you don't know how you're going to spend money and you don't know if you're going to make good deals. But if you feel like you're forced to for PR, which I've been in many times in my career, you end up signing crappy deals.
What's one of those examples?
Oh, my God. How about Jared Saltalamacchia? 3 years. John Buck, 3 years. I love you, John. I do, but you got more years. Here's a hint to everyone out there. If you have a free agent who's willing to sign with your team without ever visiting you or meeting you in person, you are overpaying.
That happened in both those cases, right?
It certainly did.
Any other ones or no?
Al Leiter, we gave him $8 million for 1 year when no one else was offering him anything, and he would get to live at home, and we thought he'd be a great leader for us. That didn't work. We thought that we met Jose Reyes. That was good, but then it didn't work out. God, so many mistakes. Thanks for bringing me down memory lane. Hold on, let me go get my World Series ring so I can look at it, so I can remember that one time we beat the Cubs.
David Samson here on Sports Talk Chicago. David, let's talk some Cubs. What do you think about their look this year?
So are they rebuilding or not?
I really don't know, to be honest with you. It seems like they have enough money to spend, obviously, if they want to spend money buying a soccer team, potentially in Europe. But yet, as we see today, they aren't making many moves.
So I want to help out your fan base.
Okay.
Just because an owner has enough money to buy another asset does not mean that he should put that money into an asset that doesn't make money. So the Cubs make money on an asset appreciation basis. So they're worth more than what he paid for them. But on an everyday operating basis, they do not make a lot of money. And as an investment, maybe if he sells, but I don't think Ricketts wants to sell. So just because he wants to buy an EPL team doesn't mean that your payroll should be 290. And I also think that getting rid of Rizzo and Baez and Bryant was very smart from a baseball standpoint. Very smart. Those guys are going to be overpaid by their teams. There's no question about it. But you need to make smart signings. And you need to win if you're the Cubs, because that is the way to help Wrigleyville. That's the way to sort of bring everything back post-COVID. So it remains to be seen what happens. But Theo, let me just end with this on this subject. Theo's no fool. He left there for a reason.
What do you think about Jed Hoyer and his job so far after Theo?
You know, Jed Hoyer is very smart, and he learned from Theo, who's very good at his job, but you can only be as good as your owner lets you be. So one of the things that matters and why Tampa can be so good is they make a plan and they stick to it. They make a 3-year plan and they stick to it. They make a 5-year plan and they stick to it. We could barely make a 3-week plan with the Marlins without changing it. And I feel as though the Cubs need to figure out their plan and then stick to it.
What about the White Sox? How they looked entering the year?
I think Jerry Reinsdorf, like me in 2003 when we won, all I wanted was to win one World Series. And the minute we won, all I wanted was to win a second. And I know that Reinsdorf so badly after 05, so badly. He wanted 05. He wanted it more than a Bulls championship. That's how badly he wanted to win a World Series. And then he won it, and he was like, man, let's do that again. And now it's been 17 years. And he knows that he doesn't have forever. And he's got a good team, but he wants to win a second ring so badly. I hope he does.
What do you make of their signings of Vince Velasquez, Joe Kelly, Josh Harrison?
You know, each year, teams make under-the-radar, quote-unquote, signings, and every year, one of them works out. So last year, as an example, at the trade deadline, what the Braves did, all of the analysts said, yeah, well, they didn't do much. They did stuff on the fringe. They got Soler, they got Rosario, they got this guy Duvall from the Marlins. Whatever, it's fringe stuff. It's not the big trade deadline acquisition. Meanwhile, they played so well down the stretch as a team, they won a ring without their best player, arguably Acuna, which means you don't really know how moves are going to work out until after. But you hope when you make your off-season signings that you did better than your competitors. So Josh Harrison is not who he used to be, right? Velasquez, Kelly is on the older side. But if you hit it right, they're the perfect signings that you look back and say, what a genius that team is.
Where do you see them going this year, the White Sox? How do you rank them in the American League and potentially their World Series hopes, too?
So I think they should be one of 12. But again, it's hard for me. The reason I'm not doing predictions yet is there's still so much. Normally, on March, whatever date we're on, the majority of transactions are complete, and you can actually evaluate teams. The reason I'm not willing to evaluate right now is there's still so many changes that are going to happen on rosters that I'm going to have to wait till opening day is when I'm going to make some predictions.
David Samson still here on Sports Talk Chicago. David, a few more questions before we finish up. First off, how do you have the guts to curse out booing fans?
So I did not, right? Because I didn't want to, because I was brought up that cursing is never going to help you win an argument. So I would always want fans to curse at me because I knew I'd win in any argument. And what I would do is I'd walk around the ballpark during games, and sometimes I'd get booed like to my face. And I would immediately stop and sit down and talk to that fan. And I wouldn't leave until I had turned that fan around. I had this view, like with my new show, just one person at a time, one listener at a time, one fan at a time. If you educate people, they tend to understand your perspective better. So I never minded being booed. I never minded being cursed at, but I minded when I didn't get the opportunity to try to engage with that fan.
How do more owners and presidents do that? Like walk around the park, engage with fans?
Because they have thin skin.
and obviously you don't, and that
Oh
obviously
no.
played a role.
Yeah, I loved it, right? I had a rule, and it's a great rule if you're going to be a public figure. If you don't want to believe the negative that people say and write about you, then you sure as hell can't believe the positive. So I am the person who I don't believe when someone writes something good about me, and I don't believe when someone writes something bad about me. And by having that point of view, it enabled me to ignore all of it. But there are many owners and presidents who they focus on just the good, and then they start believing their own press. And when someone says something bad, all of a sudden it's an enemy forever. And I just never was like that.
David, before we finish up today, last question. What's the funniest locker room moment you've had with a player?
Asking Joe Borowski to put underwear on when he would walk around the clubhouse. I don't know why I'm thinking of this right now. It's funny. He would walk around the clubhouse naked, fully powdered. He would put powder from his neck to his toes. And he'd walk around the clubhouse completely naked. And I don't mean just the front of his body. Somehow he had the arms. God knows I don't think anyone assisted him. But he had powder everywhere, like every crevice. And he'd walk around, and I'd be like, Joe, seriously? Like, we're going to have to vacuum the powder, and I'm way too close to you right now. But that was always funny with Joe.
Did he ever say why he did it?
I never even asked. I assumed chafing.
David, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate the time as always. And best wishes, but nothing personal as well. Thank you so much.
Have a great day. Thank you.